Shalom, shalom, family in Messiah. I pray you can all hear me well. Somebody give me a 5x5 to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music. We're got a few stories to cover tonight that I believe will be important for us to understand, especially going forward. There are many things that are starting to happen in our world. And again, somebody just give me a 5x5 if you can hear me. Okay, great, fantastic. That's all I needed to know. I always want to double check. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for this week's weekly review. And there are, again, as we continue to watch, continuing to see rumbling going on in the East. And I believe that China underestimated the reaction that the people would have. And now we're starting to see the Chinese police themselves are no longer in unison with the white coat wearing uh, enforcers, if you will. So there's now a break in the ranks between the Chinese police departments. Here, I'll just go ahead and put this on the screen so you can see this. And this is starting to change, folks. This narrative is no longer holding even among those that are part of the government, and they are not participating anymore. They are no longer um, cooperating, if you will. And so this is starting to break down. This is actually good news because it indicates that there's slowly becoming a greater atmosphere of accountability. The light is starting to shine, and now you're seeing the pushback even from local police departments. This is a police officer arguing with and demanding that these restrictors prove and demonstrate that they are lawfully operating. So they're holding them accountable in every place. Now, again, yes, you will notice that they are still complying with the narrative to some degree. There is just tremendous witchcraft that we are all dealing with here, and we're seeing a lot of the effect of that witchcraft is still operating in the world. And so, saints, we cannot let down our guard. This is why we must continue to pray, blow the shofar, call for the light to come in. And the more people begin to see the truth, the more that there's a pushback. And this is something that they did not orchestrate. This was not organized by propagandists. This is an authentic and grassroots reaction to restrictions, to limitations that I believe the people are organically responding to and have had about enough of. And again, this is also connected with the real estate crisis that's going on in China, the economic crisis that's going on in China, and also the many people did not know that there is a severe drought that is going on in China as well. And so they have a very serious water problem. Those in the west coast of the United States, well, frankly, in many places around the world, can identify with that. And so China has many problems that are starting to affect the confidence that the people have in the government as it stands today. So this is an area, again, we're going to continue to watch this because this is the kings of the East, right, Saints? So what we know from the scriptures that 200 million man army is going to make its way west into the promised land. And so the river Euphrates is dried up, and the way of the kings of the East has been prepared. And so we know that these things are all being stirred up for the final conflict, and we are all paying attention. So let's continue to pray for those that are still sleeping, that are not aware of the reality of the world that they're in, who continue to think that somehow we're going to go back to some wonderful status quo, which, again, it's difficult to explain to folks who want to continue to believe in that, if you will. But I believe that we're going to continue to see greater light, a greater exposure of the deeds of darkness, a greater exposure of the work of the wicked one, and that the light is winning. Right now, you're seeing patriot movements throughout the earth that I've never seen in my lifetime. More and more countries are rising up against establishment authority, that are beginning to push back against the official narratives, the propaganda narratives. And we're talking about entire governments now, like the government of Italy and other governments as well, that are starting to really push back hard against the international narratives and so forth. So these things are starting to crack very hard. There's a tremendous amount of light that is now shining. And as we talked about over the last couple of weeks, we talked about a number of different areas where you're going to continue to see more and more exposure of things that were hidden. All their secrets will be revealed. Next story I want to bring up, again, very devastating and very concerning. FBI is investigating deliberate attacks on a North Carolina power substation. I don't know if you folks have been paying attention to this, but the FBI is working with state and local law enforcement officials to investigate Saturday's, this is on the Shabbat, deliberate attacks on 2 electrical substations in North Carolina that led to power outages impacting tens of thousands of people. And so the facilities were damaged by gunfire in an intentional act of destruction whose motive remains unclear, authorities said. No arrests have been made in connection with the incident. The FBI is investigating the willful damage to power facilities in Moore County, said Shelley Lynch, a spokesperson for the FBI field office in Charlotte, and she declined to provide further details. About 32,000 customers of Duke Electric in southeastern North Carolina remained without power or heat late Monday. The county declared a state of emergency and implemented a curfew, and schools were closed nearby. So again, I don't know how the curfew is going to help, but it's going to keep people from moving about too much. Moore County Sheriff Ronnie Field said Saturday that law enforcement personnel were working to gather evidence and identify the perpetrators. Fields declined to say how many gunshots each substation or whether security cameras captured footage of the attacks, citing a need to protect the investigation. So we're not going to get any further information about this unless they want us to. Investigators are exploring whether the incident was connected to a drag queen show held in the town. Again, I don't know why that would even be remotely relevant, but again, this is something that we need to be paying attention to. I believe is extremely dangerous if it becomes a trend. And of course, I'm thinking about the trend that we saw over the last year and a half, where coincidentally, and of course, completely unplanned, and I'm sure just a sheer coincidence, that we had food processing and food manufacturing plants start going down and having coincidental fires and coincidental damage and coincidental issues. So if the next layer of this is to attack the grid, then this starts to become extremely problematic going forward, not only from just a normal life standpoint, but in terms of employment, everything that was in that area that was affected. It's not just residentially, everything that was functioning inside that zone where that power was being provided just got shut down. So this is a very dangerous thing to see as a trend. If this becomes the new, like I said, if it becomes like what we saw and are continuing to see with other types of infrastructure that seems to be systematically coming under some form of attack, could this be the next door? What are your thoughts, folks? Please share in the comment section. what you're thinking and what you're discerning. I believe this is something that we're unfortunately going to have to watch with great interest. And they did not, of course, indicate that they had any suspects. So whoever did this appears to have known what they were trying to accomplish. They intended to turn the power off and knew the area. So this was intentional and deliberate. And I hope they catch the guys that did it. But it's very scary information to suddenly see this kind of thing being done if that becomes a trend. And of course, they're laying this narrative out. And this is the other part that makes this really concerning, is because out they come to tell us, well, we've known for quite some time that the power grid, was a terror threat, and boy, oh boy, this could really be bad. And of course, now they're putting that narrative out there to indicate, to try and locate this. See here, this is what they're really looking for. And the question is, who they designate to be those things, right? So this is very, very dangerous, what we're seeing here starting to unfold. We need to continue to pray that the perpetrators of such acts would be apprehended, and any plots to do more harm would be foiled, and those perpetrators, again, brought to justice. Because, folks, this is a multi-layered conflict that you're watching unfold. And the bad guys are losing. The remnant out there, you who are praying, who are seeking first the kingdom and his righteousness, who are praying for your communities, you're praying for your nations, you're praying for your leaders, you're seeing effect. It's way more than you realize is happening. And wickedness is no longer swaying the way it used to because of the amount of light. It's all of a sudden, this is, a time when you could be made YouTube famous, right? And not in a good way. And so we're going to continue to see more and more manifestations that I believe are going to demonstrate that, well, those forces that thought they were going to rule the world are not going to be doing so well. As a matter of fact, I just saw this story. I don't know if you guys were aware of this. This was kind of flew a little bit under the radar, that Mr. WEF, World Economic Forum man himself, Victor Klaus Schwab, is rumored to have had his second heart attack. And all of a sudden, people don't quite know where he is. So we're going to be watching that with some interest. I believe you're going to be seeing a lot of shaking up going on in Europe as the reality of the results of the conflict begin to surface. We're going to find out more and more about what really happened. I think with the release of the now, what are they being called? The Twitter files, now that that Elon Musk has released the back channel communication. And again, that's just the beginning. I told you guys a lot of things that are secret are going to be revealed. And boy, oh boy, that didn't take long for that word to be confirmed, did it? And massive secrets. And I laugh only because I can't believe they thought they were going to get away with this like indefinitely. Like, didn't they know that everything they say, they built the systems to record everything, and then they go and they talk in front of them. It's just the craziest thing in the world when you really think about it. But here we go. And they're waking up and they're starting to realize, and Europe is starting to, come to the table with a different attitude. And, they were talking differently a while ago, but now Ukraine war shows Europe they're not strong enough, said the Finnish prime minister. And the Finnish prime minister, Sanna Marin, on Friday offered a brutally honest assessment of Europe's capabilities in the wake of Russia's war on Ukraine, stating bluntly, we're not strong enough to stand up to Moscow alone. And visiting Australia, the leader of the pending NATO member said Vladimir Putin's invasion and occupation of neighboring Ukraine had exposed both European weaknesses and strategic blunders in dealing with Russia. And of course, so they're starting to walk back some of their tough talk And a lot of people are going to suffer as a result of their very foolish saber rattling. And I think we all know, without having to get too much into the details, that there was a lot being covered up that really was going on the ground there in Ukraine. We are going to be talking about that in future episodes of the weekly report and weekly review. So just know that Ukraine is a deep, dark cave of wicked and evil things that are going to be coming to light. So prepare yourselves, because the things that we're going to have to learn, unfortunately, are more disgusting than emptying a septic tank. Some of the foulness and detestable things that these wicked people did in the dark, unfortunately, have to now come into the light of day. And that is where it gets, well, it's going to be brutal, folks. There's going to be no nice way to say that. And we're going to learn a lot of what was going on. And so I think you're going to see a lot of these politicians who can smell the trouble coming are going to be trying to get ahead of that. Unfortunately for them, that is not likely to be successful. Many of them have already been so heavily compromised by detestable acts, and let's just leave it at that. They've become so themselves basically tools of the system that they're irredeemable. That reminds me to keep an eye on the Supreme Court and the case that it is reviewing. And just again, to put a little additional color into that story, many of you may not have known this. I just found this out, that the Supreme Court actually was actually helping with that case. In fact, asked them if they needed any help with that case to make sure that everything was done correctly, to make sure that the case got in. I've never heard that before. So this tells me that they were very interested in this case that came before them, which potentially could remove up to 388, I believe, total defendants who are being, shall we say, challenged. Their patriotism is being called into question. So they are being charged essentially with treason. And so, again, this is a very serious thing. And I pray that we continue to see more light in this area. I believe we're going to see a tremendous amount of information that comes out. And I think we've all been already a little surprised by what's surfaced. Well, more is going to come out that's going to reveal just what they were up to, and just how dangerous these folks really are. And that's, I think, the other point that we all have to understand. We're dealing with some very serious, dangerous folks. So this was sent to me by our sister Octavia. I want to put this on the screen. Oncologists, I'm seeing people with stable cancer rapidly progress after being forced to have a blankety blank. Okay. So suddenly we're seeing a dramatic increase in medical cases. I believe this is unfortunately irreversible. This trend is going to continue. And sadly, we are going to witness a tremendous number of people lose their lives, and because they fell for a strong delusion. The Dr. Tenpenny did a talk recently, and someone asked the question, I believe it's on BitChute, so you can find it, but someone asked the question, well, what would you say to those who, what kind of comfort can you give them? And she says, basically none. You took something that marked you. It is irreversible, and it is not like you can simply withdraw it from your system. So wake up and realize that this was a serious war. Now, we just discussed what's going on in the Far East. You're seeing that Europe is going through major shaking. And I believe you're going to see more there. Keep an eye on Switzerland. Keep an eye on these places that people perceive there to be safe haven, especially if they've been involved in nefarious activity. Those aren't going to be safe havens anymore. So the safe havens are going to be going away. You're going to see tremendous light in these, quote, safe havens and places where the dark has held sway. And I'm not talking about just people that, swindle money or, whatever, traders and all. No, I'm talking about dark. We're talking about the devil's people. We're talking about satanic, evil worshipers of false deities who do harm to innocents and do wickedness. And I don't want to describe that wickedness. There's so many channels out there that'll be happy, delighted to go into the depths of the wickedness. Just suffice it to say for this broadcast that there's some very evil people in the world who just need to be removed. And that is exactly what the book of Enoch tells us will happen, is they will be removed. Unfortunately, because the system that we all learned to live in and were forced, because we all pretty much hate it, we're forced to live in, is crumbling around us, saints. And they do not announce the kinds of, it's not like they're going to announce that to you. So it is crumbling around us, and you're seeing more and more signs of that. Take a look at this. Many, many more voices are now calling this inevitable. And I believe the reason why is because they want to move to that final phase, which is that digital currency. And that is how they will, that's like their last hurrah, is to force everyone into currency systems that they can fully control. Folks, so that the war's been on against cash. Oh boy, that goes back 35, 40 years. We've been watching the attack on cash slowly happening to the point where you feel like a criminal for having any, which is the craziest thing in the world. But that's what they've done. They've essentially criminalized it little by little, to the point where if you want to go to the store and use cash, you might be frowned upon, or they might be eyes on you like, whoa, what are you doing? I remember going to load a debit card so I could pay a bill and getting weird looks because I was using cash. But this is a reality, and that was years ago. So now the war is full on, and they expect crashes. I've heard from now more people that were unable to access their resources as they expected. So they have to double check now. Now they have to, let me go check. Why should they even have to check? Shouldn't it be something that they can easily access? Wasn't that the whole deal? I'm going to put my money over here, and then when I need it, I can come get it. Except that when I need it and I try to come get it, it's not available. That, my friends, is called a crash. Okay, they cannot admit it all they want, but when the money isn't there, when you aren't able to go retrieve it, that's a problem, right? So that's a major problem, and a lot of people are finding that out. As I've said several times in the last week or two, it is one thing to lay it up; it's another thing to get to spend it. And many people are laying up, or have laid up, treasure here on earth, and here come the moth and the rust and the thieves that break through to steal. Here they come, and they are falling left and right. And this is the big reason why I'm going to show you a huge reason why many of them are super exposed in these things called derivatives. And this is huge. I mean, we're talking, well, there's millions. Is that really trillion? And these people are way exposed. These banks are absolutely going to get absolutely pummeled as this comes out. And you can just go down this list and you can see all the big names, huge banks, all involved in these derivatives that are highly, highly volatile in this next season. Because again, these are created assets. These are not real. These are manufactured in the banking sector. And without getting into what, how this actually works, because I don't even think they understand. I've heard people that are supposedly experts, and they're like, I can't even explain it, right? And look how much money they've got dumped, and they're the ones yelling about how bad crypto is. Meanwhile, look at these guys, right? So it's like the corrupt calling out the corrupt, the bad guys calling each other out. They're all just as guilty. They all have manipulated. They all have played this game. And now the average person is going to be standing there wondering what happened. Because again, it ripples. And this is the thing that I want you all to start to understand about the news. It's not just one story here or one issue there. These things ripple. And so if we start to see, for example, the same thing that happened with the food processing plants start happening with power plants, I don't have to tell you all how dangerous that is. It's not just not having power, which is bad enough, but now add the security issues that now come as a result of the absence of consistent electricity, which powers a lot of our security infrastructure. That includes ring camera phones, security surveillance, our emergency response. So you now have, and you have the criminal element in any community suddenly, the opportunists, if you will, in that community suddenly excited with the notion of being able to get away with crime. So what do you always see in those situations? You see a severe increase in crime as a result. And this is the atmosphere that I believe some want to create. They want to initiate and instigate an atmosphere where if they can't create civil war, they can create civil unrest, they can create general unhappiness. They certainly can invoke certain loss of life if you continue down this road. And power, which it's like sacred. You can't mess with that. You're going to kill millions of people. There are folks that know that. And so all the more reason for us as a community and for every one of you to be seeking alternatives in every vertical that you have vulnerability. Electrical power is certainly one of them. It's one of the reasons why we have worked and continue to work very hard here on solutions to that kind of problem. But it's not just that. You've got serious vulnerability in water. Not just the water that you might drink, but bathe in, wash clothes in, wash food in, so forth, etc. They have checkpoints in various areas that can potentially be points of exposure for all of us. So we all have to begin to rethink what we've lent out trust on, areas that we have all trusted those powers that be, if you will, to look out for our best interests. And unfortunately, what we're finding is that is foolishly placed trust. Now, there are various things that, one of the things that we're keeping an eye on is martial law. Martial law may be declared over North Carolina. I know there were residents that were calling for that. And so we're going to kind of watch that with interest, because that is another thing that can start to become all too common, which means your interstate or inter-nation travel would then be severely restricted. So you see why these things all matter. It's important because if you had plans, for example, to get 2 states over and you were just getting some things wrapped up, you might want to accelerate those plans at this point, because it could very easily start becoming a situation where travel starts becoming more restricted. So again, these are the kinds of things that we've got to keep an eye on during these times. And so be aware of that. And also travel is becoming more and more dangerous. Just several years ago that I began to say to Mama, we need to watch these. This was before this latest couple of years with the crazy that went on. Even before that, because these airplanes were getting older, they had a certain amount of time that they were supposed to last, and they were pushing them way past their expiration dates, if you will, for obvious reasons. So that alone had me concerned about air travel and just how safe it would be going into the future as these fleets of airplane get older and older. But now add the element of vaxxed pilots that are not making it to the other end of the flight. We just heard about another situation where that occurred. And so, is this going to become the next norm? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. We're seeing more and more news that is confirming that those that go up into the upper atmosphere are putting their body in a heavier strain. And so how long before a lot of that's grounded? So that cuts a lot of the travel there. Now getting a flight isn't going to be as easy. And if that continues, again, if that trend continues, that restricts a lot of our movement. And then also I want to remind everyone that there are many laws that are changing as of January 1st of the Gregorian calendar. And Illinois, for example, is one state that has the cash bail laws have been changed now. So they no longer are going to be accepting cash bails for certain things, which means criminals are going to be getting released even after having committed horrific crimes like, carjackings or house invasions. I forget the actual list, but there were a number of them that were very concerning. I know that if I lived in Illinois, I would be very concerned. I may not want to live in Illinois. In fact, I don't live in Illinois, but I will be praying for those of you that do, because it almost seems to me that they are deliberately setting up an atmosphere where there will be conflict and there will be those who do harm one to another. So be aware of that and don't allow yourself to be victimized if you don't have to, obviously, by being aware. And that's one of the reasons why we want to keep ourselves awake, especially concerning those things that are happening in the earth. Another thing that he mentioned to me many years ago was that we would see UFO and alien things become so common it would become almost mainstream. And now we're seeing a lot more of that information that is coming out and becoming part of the narrative. I would caution everybody concerning anything that has to do with interstellar or travel outside of the firmament. I would really caution you to be hyper skeptical of any narratives that infer that, there's people coming from faraway galaxies. I think a lot of that nonsense is part of what they hope to do. And, let's just hope that it's not successful. However, there is considerable material that is making it out into the public, which is, quite compelling, right? And so again, is this interstellar or is this inter-Earth? I would suggest that a lot of this technology is going to be found out to be inter-Earth and maybe interdimensional. But nevertheless, I think we're going to see more and more of this. So we need to be prepared for that and not allow ourselves to be caught up in some of the things that I think they're going to unleash upon us. And again, these are using technologies we just may not know much about. And we take for granted the earth that we live in. But I know that there are more and more unidentified flying objects, for lack of a better term, things that they don't know what they are. And so a lot of that manipulation is going to be happening. And I believe taking advantage of fear, taking advantage of people who just simply don't have a compass, don't understand the real world in which we live in, and as a result are tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. So this is a very dangerous time. I want you to continue to pray for awakening, especially in the areas of fraud, deceit, lies. What you guys are all finding out is that the people, and I don't care who it is, I don't care who it is. You could be talking to a drug dealer. You could be talking to be like hardened criminals. You could be talking to people that are like what you would consider to be the worst sinners you could ever find. And when they start to get red pill, when they start to go, what they did, what, it's amazing what a transformation it happens when people encounter the truth, and it doesn't matter where it is. It could be the truth in any area. And we're seeing even those that we consider to be celebrities and what have you, they're encountering truth and it's blowing their circuits. We need to keep praying for that to keep happening, because as more and more people are coming into the knowledge of the truth, as more and more people are awakening, then this is going to continue to make it possible for not only for cleansing, if you will, but also for us to have closure. Because again, if you know, if finally the truth comes out, you can close things that you didn't know or were wondering or what have you. And this is part of a MK Ultra mind game. They like to cause these sort of loose ends or cliffhangers, and then leave you wondering with no closure, and too many loose ends. I think they figured out how to create schizophrenia. I think they figured out how to create paranoia. They certainly knew how to create narcissism, which is hyper dangerous. So these are all things that we need to be aware of, and the effect that they have on people as well. Lastly, I just want to encourage all of you who are not participating in holiday activities, because this is you've been awakened in that area. I want to encourage you to be praying for those that are family and friends who are still caught up in that web, if you will, and are not awake. Pray for them to get that meme that does it, or that question, and then be there to be sort of that coach along the way. One man plants, another man waters, but it is Elohim that gives the increase. And so unless he draws them, they can't come. So this is where your prayers are really important, because if you pray for them and you start to agree with your brothers or your sisters for their life, you can pull them right out of that fire. So maybe it's going to be a news story. Maybe it's a realization that the king is coming. Maybe it's the seeing of fulfillments of scripture being fulfilled. It could be any number of things that suddenly starts this sort of wake up process. And then as soon as they start waking up, it can kind of snowball. It can kind of get going quick, actually. They may even outrun you in an area too, where they find out some things and go really deep, where you knew enough and you didn't need to go any further, and they went all the way in. Don't discourage that. Encourage them, pray for them, love on them. It's very important that we be available to our friends and family in this time. This is a critical time of awakening. And many of them are suddenly realizing their world is not what they thought it was. None of it works the way they do. The people that they thought were rich and they could just go to the bank and get money anytime they wanted, are finding out that they don't even own their own money. This is wild. This is like mass gaslighting at levels. People are finding out when they try to go get it, when they try to go grab something, and it's like, what do you mean I can't? What do you mean I got to explain it to you? What? Since when do I have to explain what I'm? This is the new world, and it's going to get worse. And so the more people wake up, the more disturbed they are. This is our opportunity to share the gospel of the kingdom with them, encourage them to come into the kingdom, be free from their sin, accept the gift of salvation, and become a part, to graft into the kingdom of Elohim, the kingdom of Yasharel, and be saved. Amen. And so this is what we ultimately want for all of them. He's not willing that any should perish, but that all would come to repentance. And that's why we want to continue to highlight news that indicates his coming. You're seeing all of this light that wasn't there even just a year ago. And we had a lot of light then. Now we have more. Stand by. There's going to be even more light coming as more things are exposed. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm grateful for everyone that joined us here on the chat. I want to encourage you again to continue to like and subscribe and share the content on this channel. We certainly appreciate every single one of you. and we do need your support in this hour. If you are looking for a way to have auxiliary power, you definitely want to reach out to us. We are in the midst of a very special project for that and really excited about it. And so stay tuned to our channel for more updates on that. I've got a video that I'm going to be putting out here real soon just to encourage everyone. So those of you that have been excited about um, uh, our energy, New Kingdom Energy project, you're going to hear more about that, and you're going to get a very good opportunity to jump in. And again, this is unprecedented technology. It's an unprecedented way of producing that energy. And I believe it's going to be not only beneficial, but it's going to change the way in which we start to look at everything. We got to ask questions about everything. They've lied about so much that we've got to begin to ask new questions and look at things differently than we've ever done before. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm grateful for every one of you that are participating with us. And if you haven't done that, please do. We really need your help right now. You're seeing that, we will live on a shoestring so we can work to produce answers for our brethren. We mean that. We're sincere about that. So when you help us, you're helping all of us. You're helping the entire household of faith. And we're doing all of that with the intent of helping secure you all as we move forward into these days of great trouble. Thank you so much for joining us. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Shalom.